session to order. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Father, in the name of Jesus, we pause to give you honor and glory. And as we come together to make decisions for the students in Alabama, let our decisions be for the betterment of all. Lord, we pray that every discussion will be fruitful. We pray that every decision that's made will benefit all that are involved. And we pray, Father, that as we go forth, that we'll never forget that we are here to serve. We ask it all in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
We're going to ask Mia Scott from the Retirement Services to come forward.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank y'all for having me this morning. I'm Mia Scott. I'm the Legislative Counsel for the Retirement Systems of Alabama. And Dr. Mackey asked me to come talk to y'all for a little bit about RSA and see if we can answer some questions that I think came up during the board retreat. And so I put together a few slides that I'm going to kind of walk through. But y'all stop me at any time. I'd rather talk, answer questions than talk. So I'm going to start. I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about funding and how the pensions are funded, because I think you need to understand some of that before we talk about retiree benefits. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about TRS and PHIP, the health insurance plan, and what our fiscal year 26 budget requests are going to be, just to help frame that up for y'all in y'all's discussion about your budget too. So when we talk about RSA, I like to set the context that RSA consists of TRS, the Teachers Retirement System that we're going to focus on today, but we also have the Employees Retirement System, which is the state and most of your local governments throughout the state participate in that, plus the Judicial Retirement Fund, which is all of your judges, your recently hired circuit clerks, and district attorneys. And so really, most public employees in the state fall under an RSA pension by statute. But we're going to talk about TRS. And when you talk about TRS, we're obviously talking about K-12 here. And y'all are the largest part of the Teachers Retirement System. Y'all make up more than half of it. But we also have community colleges, universities, and state education-related state agencies, such as the Department of Education under TRS. And how all of these benefits are funded for the defined benefit that employees are entitled to once they've worked at least 10 years and they hit all the retirement qualifications. It's funded through the member contribution, the employer contribution, and then RSA's investment earnings. And we pre-fund the benefits throughout an employee's career. And those monies are held in trust per the Constitution by RSA and can only be used for retirement benefits. And I'm going to just show briefly, this is kind of a one-year snapshot of income sources for RSA, and it can vary by year. And so you have the employee contributions, and so this is for all of the active TRS members. There's around, I think, 130,000 actives, and their contribution rates are set in statute, depending on if they're Tier 1 or Tier 2, and it comes out of their salary, it comes to us. And so that total for fiscal year 23 was almost $500 million, or more than $500 million. The employer contributions, by statute, RSA's actuaries calculate what that amount is going to be every year. So they do an annual evaluation of RSA's assets and liabilities, and they determine what the employer rate needs to be to pay towards the normal costs that members have earned and also towards the unfunded liability. That's also a percentage of payroll, and that's submitted directly from employers to us. So we don't get a line item in the budgets for the pensions. It comes from the employers themselves. The legislature just sets that rate in the budgets. And then the biggest piece of the pie for fiscal year 23 was investment income. It was about $3.3 billion for that. And that can vary because we are a creature of the markets. Last year was a good year, or 23 was a good year, about 13% return. The year before that was not good, it was a negative return, and so it fluctuates and it's pretty volatile. So you also look at the benefits we paid out for 23. It's a big number. So $2.5 billion on the retiree payroll. At the same time, there is that trust that has kind of the assets set aside, and for TRS, that's about $28 billion set aside to pay out future benefits. So, retiree cost of livings. This has been a hot topic recently, especially with inflation. And before we kind of talk about Alabama, I like to kind of frame up what other states do. And so some states have cost of living adjustments built into the pre-funded plan and their benefits, like Georgia. It is in their statute that retirees get a COLA, and so those benefits were funded throughout their career. So you've got about 74 state pension plans, and I know you say, well, there's only 50 states, but you have a lot of states have a state employee plan, a K-12 education plan. They may have multiple statewide plans for different groups of people. Ad hoc COLAs. That is historically how RSA's COLAs have been granted, because there is no COLA benefit in statute set up for retirees, and so there is no funding throughout the employee's career to pre-fund a COLA in the future for them with their benefit. There's about 27 state pension plans that if they do any COLAs, it's on an ad hoc basis.
For how many states?
About 27. So like we talked about, retiree COLAs are not included in our plan design. And historically, the COLAs that have been granted in the past have been done through legislative acts, and that's the only way that it can be granted. TRS, ERS boards don't have authority to grant retiree COLAs. It must be done through the legislature. But they were done, when they were passed, there was no funding attached to it. So the retiree COLA was granted, and then the liability for that COLA was just added to RSA's liabilities. And then that increase in the liability was funded over, the next 30 years through the amortization schedule. And so the benefit was given to the current retirees, but was funded by employers on the current employees' benefit. And the last retiree COLA that was done this way was in 2006. And since then, the legislature has opted to provide retiree bonuses. And if you look, you can see kind of the scale of how expensive they are. Now this includes ERS as well, but ERS state is about a fifth the size of TRS. So when you look at the total amount paid out, majority of that is for the TRS retirees. And I mean, you can see the last COLA that was granted, it was a 7% COLA, and we paid out $1.5 billion on it. And so COLAs are expensive, and it's a difficult thing to grant COLAs when they're not pre-funded throughout the member's career. And the liability for it used to be added to RSA's liability, but after 08-09 recession, we got hit pretty hard, our funded ratio dropped significantly. There were concerns about adding that liability and moving forward, being able to fund the benefits that we had already promised. And so that's why the legislature has really pivoted from the practice of granting retiree COLAs without any funding. But then you get back to the problem of how do you fund them? Because they are large numbers. Just doing a 1% TRS COLA, if the legislature was going to pre-fund it, would cost $200 million. And it's cheaper than what we would pay out over the member's career, but that's because if you pre-fund it, we get the benefit of growing that money, have an investment return, so you can do it a little bit cheaper than doing, say, a pay-as-you-go system. And 200 million is a lot, and that's just a 1% COLA. And that doesn't count how much it is for ERS and kind of the other public employees in the state. And so it's been a difficult issue, I think, for the legislature. And what they have ended up doing here recently is they grant the one-time retiree bonuses. And they would fund those either with some one-time monies that they would pass, like from the supplemental budgets. They did that for TRS bonus recently, or with a one-time increase in the employer rate. And so, you know, I don't know what the solution is that would help retirees that is affordable and sustainable. And I think the legislature grapples with that too. And there's been some kind of alternative things that have been put out there, trying to find a way to do it that they can afford that doesn't increase our liabilities. But I don't know if we have the answers yet. You know, that if we had the ability, it is to go back 50 years, put it in the plan design and pre-fund it throughout the employer's career. But to try and put that in place now is, you know, astronomically expensive. If we put in Georgia's COLA structure now, it would almost double our unfunded liability and double the amount the employers pay. So it's a hard thing to address now, and to figure out how to move forward on it. And then kind of the last thing to add to, you know, I never come with great news. No one wants to come talk to you when everything is great, you don't need more funding, and, yeah, that sort of thing. But to compound the issue is the TRS and PHIP employer rates. We're requesting increases. The TRS employer contribution rate's going up about 1% for fiscal year 26, and that's due to a number of issues. It's due to, you know, the fiscal year 22 investment returns that we're recognizing that were below our standard rate of return. It's actually, some of it is due to the outsized salary increases. That adds to our liabilities in a different way than normal salary increases do. And then some changes we've made from the board has made that Dr. Mackey sits on, from the 5-year experience study. Every 5 years, the actuaries sit down and examine the plan. And they come back to the board and make recommendations on what assumption changes need to be made, such as our members are living longer. We need to have mortality tables that take that into account. That adds to your liabilities. The investment rate of return, assumed rate of return, needed to drop. That adds to your liabilities. So they're all good changes because you want to have the best assumptions to make sure you're funding the plan accurately and conservatively so that you have the money in the future to pay off the benefits, but in the short term, they cost a little bit more money. And then PHIP. I'm sure y'all have read some of the news articles. PHIP has been level funded, and we have requested level funding for 9 years, and we were hoping we could manage some increases, maybe ask for a small employer rate increase. And then the federal government kind of pivoted on how they fund the Medicare retiree part. So the Medicare Advantage prescription drug plan that we offer to our 65 and older retirees. I am not the expert on that, and I did not bring the PHIP director he can explain it much better, as Dr. Mackey can attest to. But you know, at the end of the day, what they did is they cut the federal funding significantly, and at the same time shifted some costs to us on prescription drugs for Part D. And so a lot of that came out, we first got notice of it in March, and we've been trying to figure out how to manage it. And the board met, was that last week?
Yes. Was last week.
It seems like a month has happened since then. And they had to make some hard decisions because we were facing a significant shortfall due to those changes. It pretty much quadrupled what the plan was paying for the Medicare eligible retirees. And so you have to figure out, how do you address that? And the board, the staff presented some recommendations. And what the board ultimately did was they took kind of what the shortfall was, and they authorized the staff to take almost half of it from the retiree trust that is set up it was created in 2007, and it was set up initially to help offset the liabilities for retiree health care. Ultimately, if you could get it fully funded, it could then be an income stream that could pay for retiree health care, but we're not there. And we put in some one-time monies, but we're not putting money into it now. But it still has grown significantly because of investment returns. So it's about $2.3 billion. So the board authorized the staff to withdraw up to about $119 million in fiscal year 26 to help with the shortfall, and then to ask the legislature for the remainder, about $129 million. That's a big increase. And we recognize that's a significant amount. And we don't know what the legislature is going to do with that. If they fully fund us, then there is no need for additional action for fiscal year 26. If they don't, we'll come back to the board and look at what some other options are to make sure that the plan can be funded and we can continue to pay out the health insurance benefits. So, I bring this to you so that y'all know in your budget discussions kind of some of the other things that are going to be going on. The things we're going to be talking to the legislature about, but the things that the school boards are going to have to be looking at. Because they pay these increases from their budgets. About 72% of the total dollar for PHEP is from education trust fund monies that go to employers. And so this has a big impact. Now that I've given you all that good news.
Merry sunshine.
Yes. Y'all have any questions? Is there anything else I can help with?
I do. Since I'm not a part of the retirement system, I certainly have more than probably others who may be vested in it and a part of it and understand it because they get the memos, which I do not receive. So I very much appreciate this. I do follow the budget requests, the discussions at the board level that of course are not a part of this board. Going back to 79, I assume that's about the time Dr. Bronner came to Alabama because I wrote one of the first articles. Because education and the retirement system at that time was very different. And I think the two-year colleges actually now have his office. Yes. His old office where we had that interview. But that said, so I think it's interesting following how he has increased it. He actually has overseen a lot of investments that have gone well. Some have not gone very well, unfortunately. A lot of that has to do with the overall economy. That leads me, I just had a couple of questions. At the time that I was writing a lot of those stories, some of the associations were vested, and their employees were vested in the retirement system. Is that still the case?
That is by statute.
Yes.
That authorizes their participation, and they pay the employer rate on their employees.
The legislature approved it way back in time. Can I get a list of those? Just out of curiosity, I think that would be important too. And then perhaps some of just the numbers on the employees involved in the monies. Obviously, a salary would dictate what a retirement would be in the end. And that's also changed a lot since I first started covering. The salaries were, in terms of comparisons, they were not like they are now, a lot of them. That's not to discount any need to increase, but that's just to say that's the fact. The other question I had, in looking at models from other states, there are states, and you mentioned Georgia, and I've talked to some state board members from Georgia because they certainly have the same experiences and concerns, and we've shared information. Is that a possibility? Because this is not a new discussion, as you know. It's been going on ever since essentially 1979, which is a pretty long time. I haven't been on the board that long, but I've been on for a long time, and the discussion is getting worse. It's not improving, and that's in spite of some pretty level-headed investments, which is, I think, saved a lot of what the losses could have been, and they have seen in other states. So in terms of the future, I understand this is not your question and answer, but what do you see, changes?
I wish I had the answer to that. I can say we can afford to put in what Georgia has right now. It would just astronomically increase liabilities. The time to have done that was back in '79, but you didn't have these types of conversations about it because there's been a lot of changes to how you book your liabilities and how you calculate it. Back in '79, I don't think they put the liability for these COLAs kind of directly on the books. It was done a little bit differently, and by the time you realize how things are changing, it was in the 2000s probably.
And back in '79 is when we've seen a lot of bad proration, years where we've had to prorate the budget in order to have a balanced budget in the state. But during that time, we had proration at least 4 times. And you can ask Jimmy Baker, who's now heading up the 2-year college system, because he was the state finance person, and he was the first interview I'd go to. And he can probably give you a really good history, which he's probably done. But the fact is that we're going to see that again. And it's not going to be, it will be in the next 3 to 5 years at the most. And I don't know how the state will survive it. It's one thing to talk about increasing, but the reality is the money is simply not there. And if we take all the monies that and it's a strong lobby, obviously, you have a lot of retirees who perhaps need it, but the money is simply not there if you're going to support a lot of the changes that the legislature has put in place for things that are great. Reading, math, all those things are wonderful, but you cannot support those. And I'm preaching to why I know you've seen that firsthand. But I'm real concerned about, I know his real estate investments, some of them have gone really bad simply because, especially after COVID, people don't go back to the office. But primarily the stock market is kind of questionable. If you follow that, I don't know how we're going to fund it. And if we talk about increases, which we may or may not, I guess, put in our budget because we need to, and the board says we have to, I don't know how it will be funded.
Well, and I don't think, so, if you put it in the budget, that doesn't, you have to have a legislative act to do
Yes, you
it.
do.
And so I don't think that's the way to, you can put it in the budget, but without them passing a legislative act, it doesn't go anywhere. To your point, my main job and RSA's job is to protect the assets and make sure they are in place so that we can pay out the benefits that have been promised.
Absolutely.
And so that's going to be our number one priority, and that's why we're opposed to unfunded retiree COLAs. But we're always going to be part of the conversations of, is there a way to do it the state can afford that doesn't hurt RSA? I don't know if we've found a solution to that yet. But our role in that is to make sure that we can still, whatever happens, we can continue to pay benefits that are promised.
I've been in the system, not as an observer, but as a paid since before '79. And I can tell you part of the difference to compare us to Georgia is apples to oranges. Because Alabama's retirement system, where you get paid a certain percentage times the number of years times the top 3. And that's the kicker, the top 3. Because one of the things we're seeing, and we're proud of it, all these bonuses that we're giving to people, is escalating the salaries of these people who work 2 or 3 years. And then their retirement is very high compared to their total pay-ins. And I admire Dr. Bonner. I wish my personal investments were as good as his. And I'm not focusing on his figures. I'm posting his net. And his net retirement ROI is better than the NASDAQ or most other measures. He far exceeds it. And we're fortunate, all of us, to have him. And I'm grateful for that. And I don't understand anybody would pick out the things that may not have worked out well without looking at the total body of work. And we have been retired over 20 years. And that's a lot of money. And what we're talking about right now is the insurance increase, which is what I was at the meeting when we got Jason Davidson there, and I've been familiar and listened to your meetings, and it's in a high intellect level. I've been through Dr. Bronner's to see all the stuff. He is not an investor in America. He's nationwide, was constantly involved, and that's why you have the ROI, the return on investment that we do. But, and I think that we're very thoughtful and consider it in my personal budget. I know that insurance is going up. I know what we pay for Part D for medicine is a small portion of what the pharmacist says. When I get my statements from my medical care, I see how much is being paid versus how much I pay. So I know that I'm fortunate to get what I have. And I know costs are going up. And I'm glad the cost of my health insurance doesn't go up as high as the cost of a dozen eggs. And that's reality that we have to face. But also, as an addendum, I know that I've talked to Senator Albritton and Representative Reynolds about the concept of combining the SEIB and the PHIP. And I know that's a big discussion, because the SEIB, the PHIP, that's a total body that we're involved in. What are you seeing? Because I think that my last conversation with Representative Reynolds, he is not related to me, but he's acceptable to the combination of the two. And I know Senator Albritton is. Would you kind of relate to that, some potential impact on these numbers?
So we have, that study commission met on Monday, and so I think that's the second meeting that they've had, and so we've kind of been presenting information about the two plans. You know, at the end of the day, we're creatures of the legislature, and we're going to, participate in those discussions. I don't know if significant cost savings can be found from combining the boards necessarily, because at the end of the day, the healthcare costs are going to be the healthcare cost. I think both plans do a good job of managing it. There is some administrative cost that you might could save, but we're going to have to go through that process with the commission. I think that the difficulty in having those discussions right now is because of the funding challenges that both plans are facing right now, mainly because of the Medicare. And so we're trying to pivot to focus on how do we address those funding shortfalls, how can we manage the plan differently, what can we do differently in our strategies that can help us save money without burdening the members and the employers. And so it's a delicate balance of working through that and continuing to have the conversations with the study commission. But I don't know where they're going to end up necessarily.
Well, I know Senator Albritton wants to combine it, and Representative Reynolds seems to think that's a good idea. What is your perception about that?
I think they are.
I could ask Dr. Mackey since he's on the board.
I think they're still trying to gather information and to make sure that they've got everything that they need to make some of those decisions. PHIP and SEIB both made presentations at the first meeting. There was a presentation at this one kind of comparing the demographics and the health of the plan of the two populations with the private book of business. We're going to sit down with kind of a third party and let them look through some things and see if there's some other cost savings that they can come up with per the recommendation of the commission. And so then we'll come back in November and have another conversation. And so I wish I could tell you where it was going to go, but I don't know
where it's going to go. I think you give me some secrets.
Right.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ms. Wiss?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I really have two questions, one for you, one for Dr. Mackey, based on your comments today. So I just want to make sure that I understand. You said there are 130,000 roughly active folks paying into the system currently. Is that correct? And that of those 130,000 people, those are made up of community college. And I'm sorry, my assembly is not functioning, so I'm not looking at any sort of presentation. that body of people is made up of, community college employees, Department of Education, teachers, and did you say there were others?
A couple of education-related state agencies participate, such as the Department of Education, employees of TRS, actually, youth services. I've got a list of those.
Okay. Just want to make sure I understood correctly. And so let's just say since 1980, do you know of other states who have programmed in new structures for their retirement to build in COLAs?
I'm not aware of any. And in fact, after 08-09, the trend kind of went the other way.
Right.
A lot of
That was
states
going to be my question.
did
We've
that.
been through sort of a very difficult period in the past, so, and Alabama just stayed the course through 08-09, the current plan, is that right? Okay. So to your knowledge, has any state legislature, and I understand this isn't your decision, it's not my decision, but has any state legislature gone back to look at those populations of these people paying in who are the oldest in the system? 75 years or older, who have never benefited from any sort of increase or possibly not benefited from any sort of bonus.
So are you talking the retirees that are over?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so, we've had different requests, legislative requests at different times to kind of run numbers of how is there a way you try and target COLAs to some of the groups that might need it the most, that have a lower benefit, are older, that have been retired the longest.
Have the lowest salary
Right,
level.
yes. And we have run numbers on that. I think back in 18, maybe there was a bill tailoring a bonus that way. But I don't believe anything has ever been filed for a COLA just for a limited group like that. But that has come up before.
Okay, so that's not a new question to look at this group of employees who are 80 years and older, still maybe living at the lowest salary level, to see if there's something that can be provided for them.
And those conversations have happened, and I think the difficulty in that is where you draw the line. Because you're always gonna have somebody on that other side of the line that might have needed it, and I think that's what makes it hard to pull that trigger.
I agree, but you're making that decision anyway with the actuarials every day. You're deciding, what the numbers will be. That's a difficult decision, but not impossible. You have experts that can calculate all of that information for you.
Well, but we don't decide what their benefit amounts are
Right.
gonna be, if that's based on the statutory calculations when they retire, and ours is just what the actuaries are doing is to make sure that we're funded the levels we need to pay out those benefits.
Right, but if you have those projections of who those individuals are, especially those that are living really below the poverty level in some cases, that have been paying in, or did pay in, obviously, when they were employed, we could calculate, for instance, a small COLA for them, correct?
That can be done.
And that's been done in other states?
I don't, I'd have to look at some of the data. I don't know if other states have done targeted COLAs like that. I can't say they haven't, but I don't know if they have or not.
Okay, great. Question for Dr. Mackey. So it was mentioned here, I believe, that the word proration was thrown out, and I never like to mix that in. So explain to me where the Rolling Reserve Act intersects here, because I believe that was to prevent proration in the future. So can you just clear that up for me?
Absolutely.
Because immediately when I heard that word, I thought, well, but I thought we had the Rolling Reserve Act.
Yeah, so we used to have proration, and we've not had proration since 2009 because of the Rolling Reserve Act. It's now essentially impossible to have proration. So, but now the Rolling Reserve remember, was it was initially a calculation of, I think, 15 years, the average growth, and you calculated what the cap would be the next year. Then after the kind of mid-teens economic downturn, they dropped the highest and lowest years, so it became really a 13-year calculation. So you took the average, but you dropped off the two ends, the two tails. And 2 years ago, the legislature changed it, and they did away with all that completely. So it's still called technically the rolling reserve, but there is no rolling reserve in it anymore. It's just a cap. So the legislature capped the last budget at 6.25, this budget at 6, and then it will go to 5.75. And so there's a rolling part in it, in that if the old rolling reserve calculation is lower than the cap, then it could be the cap. But essentially now we just have a budget growth. So the current year, the budget we're going to look at, the growth is capped at 6%. Look at Dr. Payne. It's either 6 or 6.25. I got to look to see where it goes. That's 6 this year, isn't it?
For 26.
Yeah, 6 for 26. And that's what I thought. So then there will be about $380 million in new money, because we can calculate. We take last year's budget and we multiply it by 6%, or 106%. There will be more money available in the supplemental budget than in the regular budget. So the way that works now is, if there's money that comes in above the cap, then it goes into a fund and can be spent in the current budget year. So it's called a supplemental budget, because it's in the same year and it supplements. Reason I mention that is all the previous discussions about paying bonuses to retirees have been about using the supplemental funds, not the ongoing budget funds. But anyway, that's how the Rolling Reserve Act now works, and it's just a 6% cap, and then after 26, it'll go to 5.75, and unless they change the law, it stays at 5.75 forever. So we'll have a growth of 5.75. However, if you had a serious economic downturn, and let's say that the rolling cap was calculated at only 3%, then you'd have a 3% cap. It could go below 5.75, it couldn't go above that.
Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Just want to be clear
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
that we're,
And we now have multiple savings accounts. We have the old rainy day savings account. We have another savings account. We now have a third savings account called the Education Opportunities Savings Account. So in the total, in all the savings accounts, is approaching a couple $2 billion. And the Advancement and Technology Fund at the end of this month, so what is allowable for the legislature to disperse next year is going to be about $1.6 billion. So when you add the A&T and all the savings accounts together, they're approaching $4 billion in savings.
But there are limits in terms of being.
There are limits on what you can spend. So one of the savings accounts can be spent with only, obviously, permission of the legislature. One of them can only be tapped if the governor declares proration, which is an interesting caveat in the law, because as your question, and as I've said, it's almost physically impossible to have proration, but you can't tap that money unless the governor declares proration. So that savings account is just kind of a permanent savings account for a catastrophic rainy day. And then there's a rainy day fund that the legislature can tap without the governor declaring proration. And then the Educational Opportunities Act account, the legislature can tap without the governor's declaration. Obviously, they have to appropriate it, and the governor signs off on appropriations, but she doesn't have to declare proration ahead of time to tap it. And then the A&T fund doesn't require a declaration, but one of them does require a declaration of proration to be able to use it.
So it's still here as a possibility.
Right,
But they put, and this was after they thought they had guaranteed it, but they started spending money that they shouldn't have spent. And then they came back and they tried to patch that up, but, yeah. Anyway.
And Any other questions?
Yes. I have an exercise class with a lot of retired teachers, and I get asked these two questions
That's stressful.
regularly. Is my insurance going up, and if so, when and how much? And the second question I get asked is, does a lottery have to pass before we get a COLA?
Well, Ms. Scott, I'll try to take those. You correct me. So retirement going up, so the PHIP board last week met and decided not to do any increases for 2025. So increases on PHIP are effective for retirees. They're effective on the first day of the year. They don't follow the budget year. And so the board decided not to do any increases, and that caused not a big shortfall, about $5 million more, maybe a little more than that. But no, it's more than that. It's about $20 million more had to come out of the retiree trust fund. That got confusing last week. I think even in the press, not the education trust fund that we get our budget out of. There's a retiree trust fund. So the trust fund, the retiree trust fund, has done really well on investments. Ms. Scott said it's over $2 billion now, and so the board said we're going to take the difference, but almost split it in half. Ask for the legislature to fund half, and we will take half out of the retirees' money, but not directly out of their pockets. We'll take it out of their trust fund. Now, I would tell you, as a PHIP board member, I cannot speak for the board, but that's a one-year solution. If the federal government does some changes to the Medicare rules and provides, either different benefits or more funds, which I think they might in 25. I can't obviously speak for them, but if they did, then we'd have to next summer be looking at what the 26 rules would be. If they make no changes, then I think it will be hard to maintain the current levels without either going up on pays or premiums or both for retirees. And long term, maybe even for active employees too. But right now, the answer is no. Their costs are not going up for 25. Now that second question is loaded. Would you have to pass a lottery to get a COLA? So one of the things some legislators have talked about is tying some sort of gaming legislation to a retiree payout. I don't want to say it necessarily be a COLA. It could be a COLA. It could be a bonus. You have the clicker. Will you go back to that? Show the series of raises. So one of the things that's important to remember is if you retire before one of these, you get the benefit of them. But if you retire after one, you don't get the benefit because your benefit's calculated on highest salary, the highest 3 years of the last 10 years times a calculation, and that's different for
2.125.
Well, for tier 1, but the majority of our employees now are tier 2, so it's a different calculation, it's a different multiplier. But so most of our employees now have been hired since 2013 when they changed the calculation. Not our retirees. Most of our retirees are on the old system. Most of our employees are on the new system. So all that's to say, if somebody retired in 1978, and yes, we do have teachers who retired before 1978.
Dr. Mackey, these are the current, what we are currently
These are
paying
what
out
we're
on.
currently
So we are
paying.
paying a 79 COLA out
Yeah.
still.
So some people have had, if I retired in 78, I get the cumulative effect of all of these. And where you're hearing complaints from mostly are people who retired either in this range or after 2007. Mostly people who retired after 2007, who looking back at the history assumed that what had happened through all of these years, and there were colors prior to 1979, it's just nobody's alive that's still drawing them. But when they look back, they retired in 2008, they assumed that, well, they've always passed, every other year they've done a COLA, so So I don't have to worry about retiring on what RSA says I'm gonna make. I'm gonna make that, plus every other year, the legislature's gonna give me more. But that got cut off in 2008, and there's not been one since. And there's no real serious discussion about there ever being another one. So now people who are working now, many of them are like they're putting extra money in RSA 1 or other accounts because in their minds they're like, I will never have enough just from retirement to live the retirement life I want to. Those are active people working. But the people who retired in this area, I'm going to say like between 2008, 2013 especially, and up till probably 2020, there's a whole group of people who thought they were kind of banking on those COLAs lasting forever, but they're not, and they get no benefit from these because the COLAs were passed before they retired. So that's the people we're mostly hearing from. And as Ms. Scott pointed out, these have become, so this last one, the 7% COLA in 2007, of course, occurred right before the big economic recession. And it is a huge payout. It's already been about $1.5 billion. And, as you know, most of those people have a lot longer to live. Thank God, we want them living, we want them going to exercise class so they live a long, healthy life. But this payout will probably exceed $4 or $5 billion before, or more, before it naturally goes away someday. So that's why there's no talk about a COLA. Now, all this started with, so what if we did it? If the legislature did some gaming legislation, well, they could tie some of that to that, but as she pointed out, just a 1% COLA on the current retirees. So it wouldn't affect anybody who retires, let's say, after 2027. They wouldn't get any benefit from then on. If you just took the people who retired in 26 and you said, and all the way going back and said, we're going to get them a 1% increase, that's about 200 million, isn't it? About 200 million. If you did a 2% increase, 400 million. So, and you're not fixing it permanently because, again, anybody who retires after 2027 won't get the benefit from that ever again. So it's a huge amount of money.
When was the last bonus for the retirees?
I don't remember.
2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what?
2 years ago?
2 or 3, yeah.
It's a little bit, not much money.
Yeah.
It was a one-time.
It was the $2 per month.
That's right. $2 per month, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
They went back to do this. So that's kind of the way they did it for a long time. And of course, $2 per month in 1980 was a lot different than $2 per month in 2022. But that is the concern. So it could that happen? Yes, but we would have to see the legislation. There's been no gaming bill introduced that did include that, but there's been talk about it. But that's not actually been in any of the gaming bills that have been introduced. That's not been a part of it. Not been part of the bill. I want to say it's not been part of the discussion. A lot of things get discussed that don't actually get into the bill. I'll sit down and get out of the way.
Ms.
The
Scott,
experts with us.
I want to say thank you for the valuable information, and after Dr. Mackey showed the chart up there, I'm one of those that won't benefit from anything, so I don't know how I'm feeling right now, but
We
thank
can
you
make sure
for,
we're still paying out your benefit though.
Right, that's right.
thank you for
And we
coming.
didn't mean to be mean about you not being very sunshine, so.
I think I started that joke. Thank y'all for having me. I appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, well, again, thanks to Ms. Scott, who's always been said. She is great to work with, and she does governmental affairs there, and I know she works closely with Tina and Connor and with everybody else that does this work. So our next thing is our budget, I think. We have, we have hard copies, don't we? Let's pass those out, because I know, yes.
Okay, now it's up with that.
It's fine. It's
I think so.
See if it stays
In
there.
fact, we might just do this, this might take us to lunch. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, go ahead and pass them out. Yeah, sorry. Pass them out. Yes, ma'am.
These are the ones we looked at the retreat.
They are, so this is the same budget you have. They're gonna try to pull it up. My assembly is working, but I can't pull up the budget. I think it's just such a big spreadsheet, it's not pulling up. But that's why we have some. You have two documents if you look in assembly, so. This is not the PowerPoint. I know Dr. Payne did a PowerPoint for you and we've got that, but this is just the spreadsheet that we will propose to give to the Executive Budget Office. This will come before you to vote on in October. We can make changes between now and October. And remember, we can even, we can make adjustments beyond that if we want to, but we have to have an official request in prior to November 1st. So we got to get something in, but that doesn't mean as we move toward the legislative session, if you say, you know what, we really ought to, something's changed and we really want to focus on this or that, we can do that. I'm going to let Dr. Payne just kind of go through them with you. All of the, and I know everybody wasn't at the retreat, but all of the things that were brought up at the retreat or since then that you've said, you know what, I really wish we would look more at this line item, bump this one up. All those things have been included in here already. The only one that has been brought to my attention by a couple of board members, let me say this before Dr. Payne starts, in the last week, because I think largely precipitated by the thing in Georgia, is school safety money. We've been working with the legislature to fund school safety out of the supplemental budget, and I think that's probably the best way to go this next year. We technically don't do a supplemental budget request, but I think it would be good between now and the session if we really worked on that. You remember the discussion, Senator Orr sponsored that bill that's bifurcated. Aaliyah's doing part, and we're doing part, and only the Aaliyah part got funded, but he told us that he would make sure we got funded in this upcoming budget cycle for repairing locks and those kinds of things, plus our safety inspectors. And so I think I can't speak for him, but in the past, he has preferred to do that out of the supplemental, and that was our discussion back in the spring, that he would probably do that in the supplemental budget. So just kind of realize that as we have this discussion, there is a safety line item, but I think we should probably really have a lot of discussion between now and next February about what we want under school safety and ask for that to be a part of the supplemental appropriation. The good thing about supplemental money is, remember, it's available immediately, whereas the budget we're working on right now, even if they pass it in February or March, it's not available to the schools till October. If they do supplemental funds, those are available immediately, and that's what happened this year. We did have some school safety grant money, and we have had, last year, and then the advancement technology money. So those monies they're available in the summer, so they don't have to wait till October 1 to get the funds. So that's the school safety, our little opening discussion, and Dr. Payne, turn to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It was, the FY23 supplemental had $40 million for school safety grants in there that we administered out to those, so that's where that was. But if you will, we'll look at the spreadsheet, the one that is horizontal landscape. The department one, the other is passive. We'll talk about it in just a moment. But we'll just kind of, I'll let you look through page 1. If you have questions about anything there, we'll certainly bring it up and discuss it. The only two things that are really new on that page, and not new necessarily, but like AEDs in schools was added by the legislature in this past session. So we've kept a request in now for level funding of that. And then struggling readers beyond grade 3, as was discussed at the retreat, making a request of $52 million for that. So those were kind of the adjustments to that page.
Dr. Payne, can you
Yes.
clarify, I can't remember, I know we talked about data literacy. Can you share with me what that is again?
Yes, that is the, Ms. Martin, is that the Quant Hub, the reporting piece? So, right, it's the reporting piece. It's a program that reports out on the data literacy and manages the oversight of the data for, the Numeracy Act and then the AMSI and all the stuff there.
Okay.
So it's reporting on the outcomes of those things. Does somebody else have a question?
No, I was about to ask about the struggling readers, but I see it.
Okay, good. All right, so on page 2, you'll see the increase for the Alabama Summer and After School Program, going up to a request of a little over 17 million. To expand that program, this was the program that originally started with Department of Early Childhood, then came over to us, and then has been well received and is growing, so we're looking to expand that opportunity. Go down through there, you'll see some of the others there that are listed. You know, most standard things that we've done in the past that we're still doing. You'll notice that.
Just one question.
Uh-huh.
Dr. Mackey, is he down
He
there?
stepped out.
Oh, okay. All right. When he comes back, I'm sorry, I was gonna ask about the auxiliary teacher grant program. Ms. Martin, maybe you can comment on that. How is that going as far as
Yeah.
with the underperforming schools? So maybe you
Sure,
can.
yeah, no, I can.
Okay.
So you've got a couple, and then Ms. Mark's welcome to jump in,
Okay.
because she's running with it now on the change. So originally, if you remember, this was tied to the underperforming schools with the governor's turnaround program.
Yes.
And so they could hire an auxiliary teacher to work inside the classroom with a teacher. And there was enough money in this a little over 5 million to provide in those schools 1 unit for every teacher that was equivalent of a unit in K1 and 2 grades. So we had offered that, done that. Some of the schools were able to find and locate people. They have to have the 9-hour requirement, like early childhood uses for the same service. So we would be able to match the people and the quality of it. And then this year in the legislative session, the legislature expanded this line item. And they expanded this line item language to allow for a grant program for other schools that are not in the turnaround program to utilize these funds based upon several factors, one being their EL population, and then the next one being their level of support of school. And I won't go through all those levels because that's Ms. Martin's, that's her expertise, but that's in there. And then obviously even still the turnaround school programs can apply as well.
Okay.
And so you can, and then you can also get it based off your report card score, some of those things. And so those applications are available for people to apply for now to be able to find and recruit those people and bring them in. And there's a little bit of, there's actually a little bit of carryover money from the previous year in there, so they'll be able to, make sure we have plenty for this year for the ones that should apply. I mean, the hope is we have more people apply than we have money, because we know we want to put those people in place to help our kids, and especially in those younger grades and in those difficult situations that they have, whether it's, support schools or EL populations or those things. So does that answer your question?
Thank you. It does. I just wondered where we stood today. Thank you.
All right, so we'll move to page 3 then. You'll see at the top of page 3, that is where Dr. Mackey had referenced a request, as we currently had it when we left the retreat, for $50 million to be in grant form for school safety, security, climate, those things. Again, to Dr. Mackey's point, that may be the legislature chooses to not do that here in the regular money, in the regular funds that would be available October 1 of 25, but rather to do it in the supplemental next year to some portion or number of it, or the whole amount. Or more that they would do, so that the funds would be available even next summer for our schools to start on that work, and be able to use those funds to do that. And we tied that, also you'll see a little bit of an increase there, is going back to Dr. Mackey and his conversation with Senator Orr about the piece of that bill that was bifurcated, that Aaliyah got the money but we did not get ours, to make sure we have that operationally, that we can do that with our administrator and then our support people, both retired RSEs and then a couple of specialists to be able to do the walkthroughs and things that we'll be required to do as a department as we do those over the next 5 years. So then the remainder of those things you'll see are, again, pretty standard. Principal Leadership Mentoring Act, you'll see at the bottom, That one is really, you know, should round itself out next year to be about what it is, minus the fact that we may have a plus or minus of a school grade configuration. Somebody may split a school into two, which would add another principal and another assistant principal potentially. But after that, it's, you know, that one, as I told you at the retreat, is always gonna be, from a budget request perspective, you just have to take the number of positions and multiply by the available funds that could be to that person, assuming they complete the program. And then after that, you can true up, because maybe not everybody completes the program. Some may retire before the year's over, or a variety of things that they don't do to get that. But you have to account for it all in a budget request.
And I might have missed it, and I apologize. Can you remind me, what is the enrollment in order to get an AP?
So this year, and that's not this bill, just
No,
for
I
clarity's
know,
sake
but
for
I-
everybody else. But yes, this year the legislature changed the factor for AP in elementary and middle school by dropping it from, it was 490 or 500 and up, it's 300 now.
300, okay,
So
thank you.
we had made a request, and that request is also in our foundation program that we'll see in a moment, to go to 250 again for all. The 250 to 749 would put in an assistant principal for every school with that level of enrollment. All right,
Dr. Payne, I'm sorry.
yes.
Before we leave that page, with the underperforming schools, has it been determined? I know, you know, we were looking at ACAP and how people did with, you know, the -2 as far as improvements are concerned at certain grade levels. But for this pot or this particular category, how will underperforming be identified?
It's actually identified within the law. That's part of what Brendan, Dr. Payne, I'm sorry, was explaining. We're moving
I just didn't hear what those were, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. It's okay, it's okay. The support schools, the
Support.
CSI schools,
Okay.
our priority schools, changed the verbiage from failing schools to priority schools, in addition to the EL, the way it's rated, it's those with 10% or greater with EL population. So we're prioritizing those schools right now based on their 23-24 enrollment. And so those schools will be given top priority. We're working very close with Dr. Shields, Sean Stevens, I think he's back there. There you go. And Maria Franco to make certain those turnaround schools that we've already identified those ones that actually had auxiliary teachers in place, so we're reserving that space for them, as well as granting the opportunity for the other turnaround schools to be able to take part in it as
And
well.
underperforming.
Yes, absolutely, yes. And the key that we're emphasizing with them, Dr. Richardson, is those 9 hours that are required to make certain that they know this is just not your, just going to identify a person. It's actually identified the curriculum that they need to go through and the support in order to be identified as a true auxiliary teacher.
Okay. Now, I understood that, but I think I was looking at, and I think you answered it, how are we going to identify the underperforming schools? And I think you said the CSI, those category schools.
Yes,
Is that
yes,
correct?
ma'am. The CSI priority.
Yes.
So when we say the priority, that will be based on those DNFs
Right.
schools. So
Schools,
it's
yes.
using the combined indicators, the
Okay.
scores of those combined indicators in order to identify those.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
Thank you, Dr.
Yes, ma'am. All right, so we'll move to page 4. Page 4, you'll see, again, is no real substantive change in terms of programs or requests. Increases based on, you know, needs and growth. Career Tech Initiative, obviously, asking for an additional 10 million there to continue to recruit and be able to use things to get kids more into the workforce, in the career tech programs and the needs they have across our state. And then jobs for Alabama graduates, again, for the same reasons, trying to increase that, continue to have a program in throughout the counties of the state to ensure everyone has one. Questions on that page? All right, so page 5. So here you'll see an increase of about $5 million for the special ed certified behavior analyst program to assist with the high need kids in situations that we have there as that grows. And then adding a little bit to the special ed preschool program just based on enrollment and numbers to ensure we have enough to cover that and those things. And then the remainder of the total financial assistance program is pretty straightforward level funded request. And then still a little bit of an increase for Future Teachers of Alabama to continue to grow those programs as well. And then we'll go to page 6 where you'll find our local education agencies foundation program and other past flow-through funds. As I said earlier, in the foundation program, that number that obviously encompasses all of our teachers and everything else, but we did ask, or we calculated in that, Ethan Taylor does that for me, but he ran that through the program to put it in for 250 to 749 ADM would all receive one full equivalent of an assistant principal. So that would be another increase inside of that. Which is the large share of that 55 million you see, but there's a little bit, obviously for other factors, ADM changes and things like that come into that. Transportation program, we're asking for a fully funded transportation program. That's what that number of 571 recommends in that, to do that. And again, that's based off, prior year cost and the projections of fuel and things of that nature to fully fund that. There's still a bit of an increase in the at-risk and the foundation program. School nurses is going to stay level because we were able to get supplemental funds this year to match up to the salary rate that was passed in the previous legislative session. Salary schedule did not change, so other than, in this coming one, so we'll stay there to have plenty for that. And then math and science teacher salary matrix, we're asking for a $5 million increase in that because that will be entering its 4th year. We started out a little less than $80 million, probably mid-70s in funding in terms of expenditures. So it would accumulate a little bit over a couple of years there. But this year we did go above $80 million, just showing that our schools have been able to find those highly qualified teachers in science, math, computer science. There's a place in the units. So just to make sure we have enough to continue that program and pay for it fully.
I'm sorry, Dr. Payne, you said math, science, and computer teachers are in that line right there?
It's the computer science.
Computer
Some computer science.
Some computer science. It depends on if they meet the requirements in there
Yeah.
related to science and math.
We have some people teaching computer science on what we call a permit, and they do not necessarily qualify. But the certified computer science teachers do. It kind of depends on some do and some don't, but
It's a small number.
this is a pretty small number of the
In
total.
the comparison of math and science teachers, it's really small.
The ones that are on
The computer science teachers, yeah.
Oh,
The pure computer science teachers is a relatively small number, and a lot of them are also teaching. So a lot of the math teachers are teaching a computer science course, so they don't double up.
gotcha. Thanks.
Dr. Payne, I know during the retreat, we had a good bit of discussion about several of these, and I think I must have misunderstood, or maybe I'm just not seeing everything. Could you tell me in the process of when this goes over, will the notes column that we discussed, adding notes so that folks know what it's for? Specifically, I asked about access, which is on page 2, the distance learning. We're adding some funds there, and that program's very important to the schools, high schools in District 2, and I had asked, could we get an explanation for what that addition, are we expanding the courses, are we hiring other teachers? Because distance learning has become so important to many of our folks, in that expansion, what is that? So I was thinking we were gonna have notes on what these increases were going forward.
Yeah, I
Did
mean,
no,
we don't put the notes in this because this is what goes to
We're
EBO.
not, they won't take notes.
Yeah, they
It's
won't.
just numbers. But we do have the notes, yes.
Right.
So this is, what you would vote on is just what we send over, but we've saved all those notes. Specifically to this one, we can get them for you. We will use those notes when we go over and do our presentation
Right.
to the finance director and his staff, which usually is probably January, possibly in December. So we do use the notes, but what goes to EBO doesn't include it. The distance learning, you had asked about that, and this is simply expanding the number of courses, number of sections available. So we are getting more and more requests for distance learning. And this is a calculation that our staff made on what they think the projections for next year would be. We are a little concerned that it could grow a lot faster because we are getting more non-traditional requests. And those could, if those start growing, I mean, they could go outside. So we have had time in the past when we had more requests for access courses than we could fund. We didn't have enough sections for all the people who wanted it. Right, we're not, I don't think, I'm looking at staff back, I don't think we're there now. We're able to accommodate the request. And we think this will accommodate this year's request. But again, we have a section, a population, not a section of the state, that is growing pretty fast. And if they were to continue to grow, it could really balloon.
Sure, I think some systems are considering accepting virtual students that are more traditional systems, and so I just want to make sure, you know, that we're having that conversation in our presentations that, you know, we've got a growing population. This may not handle what we need.
Yeah. And
Right.
one thing to keep in mind too with that though is as those systems do that, they'll end up with ADM based on the foundation program too. So there's,
Right.
you know, some of them may use a different delivery method other than access,
Right.
but they would also have available funds to do some of that as well.
So if they add a new, like a virtual school, which we have more and more districts doing, or if it's a full-time virtual student and they're adding them in, then they count in their ADM.
Right.
But this funding is more for additional sections. So let's say I'm there as a regular student, I'm already in the ADM count, but I'm taking, there are more requests for people to take a virtual course than what that is still growing. So these are not people going into virtual schools. They're people in a traditional high school taking more and more virtual courses. Yes, Ms. Martin, do you want me to talk about the growing population? Or?
No, sir. We supplemented our previous state budget with federal dollars. And it was more so for, as Dr. Mackey indicated, we're having to do more course development. And so, due to no federal dollars moving forward, we're gonna have to make certain that we supplement that or increase the state funds in order to continue those course development for that growing population.
Now, some of our locals that have a full-time virtual school, so the students are all virtual, so they're on the ADM count. Some of them do use our access courses, but many of them work with another vendor to provide those courses too. It doesn't, but they have to make, basically purchase those services, and they get the ADM to do that. But it's the blended model that is really going out of sight.
Yes. Any other questions?
And remember, this is not, so two things, this is not final. If you think of other things between now and October, but in October we have to do something. Even after October, we can make changes. And the one, if I could end on this note, what Ms. West just brought up is a perfect example. So let's say at the end of the 20-day count, we turn this in, we get our budget to the budget office, that's that. But we figure out that we actually need double this money because of the growth in virtual courses. Then we have the capacity between now and February to go back and say, you know what, that was in our original proposal, but that will not be enough. We're going to have to ask for more in that line item. So this is, I hate to say it because I know we all want to have, well, this is the final one and done, but this is kind of the first strike at the budget, and then there will be a lot of changes between now and February, I suspect.
Any other questions?
Before he leaves, we just want to say thank you for everything you've
Yeah.
done for us, and we wish you Godspeed in your new endeavor, but remember us kindly.
I sure will, I sure will. It's been such an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
We
So-
will,
Go ahead, that's what I would think. They've got lunch ready. If y'all wanna go ahead, it's 10 till.
we'll break for lunch and resume back at 12:30.
Is that good? Perfect. Here's we've got, I know it looks like a really, really long agenda, but most of these are pretty,
The resolution?
resolutions are pretty self-explanatory. So much so that I would say, if you kind of look through items 6 and after, I don't think you're going to have any questions about any of those. 6, just so you know, if you ask, do I have any spotlight schools in my district? We haven't chosen the schools yet, so this is the resolution. And remember, we'll do a big reveal next month, which is great because we'll do the reveal of the spotlight schools. We do that in October, so it corresponds with Dyslexia Awareness Month. So
That's good.
we'll have principals and assistant principals. We have when I saw the list, I almost panicked because we had 21 counselors on the counselor resolution. We will print each one of them their own,
Okay.
but as a body, we will approve them. You know, these are all the distinguished counseling programs. And then there's several months to recognize. So there's really 2 big items to discuss. So one's the cut score, and then 2 is the adoption of the administrative code that has to do with the new graduation option. So here's what I've got on cut score. I've called everybody now, talked to you individually about doing a 3-year run to get to -1. And so we're -2 in the current year.
So you're coming this year.
Right. No, we're -2 right now.
Okay.
So we've got to decide the current school year, and we have to decide, and what I would like for us to do is to go ahead and do a 3-year run on something so we can put a dog ear one of these, because you're going to get 2 options here. So the first one is the one I've called and talked to you all about. So that's to go to -1.5 and hold there for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then go to -1 in the 3rd year. But I was also asked about, well, what if we stayed -2 for another year and still got to -1 by the end? And so that's what this would look like. It's obviously just a change in that first score. But I did 2 draft resolutions.
Great.
Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Very sorry.
Last year, when we had this discussion, and it's really up to y'all, so just so you, a reminder, so the law says, the literacy law, like you caught that, didn't you?
I did.
Says that the board, it says that the students who score in the lowest, lower division, not division, but are the ones that may be retained. Doesn't say they will be, because then we have other options. But that's our first hurdle to jump. So, and it says the board will set that. And so that's why you're in this position. We've had 2 different scores, because remember we changed the test after 21. So in 21 and 22 we did the same test based on the old standards. In 23 and 24 we changed the test. And so the cut score, this is just clarification, the cut score in all 4 of those years has been -2.
Correct.
But the raw number was different for 21 and 22 because they recalculated all that. So everything changed on the test. So we've now done, so let's just keep 21 and 22 off like it's ancient history. For 23 and 24, the cut score has been 435, which is -2 standard errors of measure. Okay, which is the 95%. I also brought that back, and I can pull it up, some of your assembly from last month. 95% threshold. I think, I don't speak for board members, but I've spoken to all of you individually. I've talked to other folks, talked to the governor, and I think that most people want to move up. Maybe everybody wants to move up over time. The question is, how quickly do we move up to -1? And then what I'm hearing from superintendents is, we want to know what the trajectory is. Like, we want y'all to quit giving us a new score every year. We haven't given them a new score every year, but you're hearing that.
Said that.
So that's why whatever y'all adopt, I would like for us to adopt something that's like a 3-year runway. It can always be changed. But I think that gives them, you know, here's where we are for this year, but this is also, we can plan. This is where we're going to be the next year and the year after. I do think that we should try to get to the -1 by 27. And I know that some people think 27 is a long time off, but it's really not. We're in the 24, 25 year now. So this is kind of where, now one of you did ask me, I'm not ratting anybody out, said, have you talked to legislators about this? No, it don't work for them.
That's right.
Work for the board, and the law says the board sets it. So I will talk to them after we get further down.
So number 2, if I may.
Yeah.
If we do it this way, there's only gonna be one, now I know 435 is a continuation of what we've had.
That's right.
But that's saying there's only gonna be 1 year of data for the 444 before we go to
That's
4.
right.
Okay,
Yeah, and the only thing about that one is,
that's not.
you remember that when Dr. DeBrock was talking, he said, you know, 2 points of data don't give you a trend line. And that, statisticians will tell you have to have 3 points of data to get a trend line.
And I'm not talking
But
against
that's-
Dr. DeBrock
no.
because he is a statistician, but we are the educators and we've got to do what's best for our kids.
That's right, yeah.
And so, but this will give us 2 years of good data, correct, the 444.
That's right, and if we did not change the test, we would have a trend line by now.
But no
The only
change in
reason
the
we
test.
don't is because of the, right. There's not gonna be any more changes to the test. Lord, I'll have to leave if we change the test anytime
Okay,
soon.
but go back, so 444 is the minus,
-1.5.
okay, and then.
454 is -1.
Okay, thank you, I just want to make sure that. I
Yes, that's
remember.
right. So, make sure I'm right on that.
Please,
So -2 is 435,
that's.
minus 1.5 is 444, and -1 is 454.
Okay,
And what are we minusing from is 473.
correct. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
After hearing those budget numbers, my numbers are all.
No, yeah, that's, now the other thing I would request of you, and I'm gonna be quiet, is that we try to do it in October. There's nothing in the law that says it has to be done now, like you can pass it next April, but I do think we've got a group of principals and reading coaches out there that really want to know as quickly as possible what the target's going to be, so that's why I'm kind of pushing.
I apologize for being late, you gotta say it one more
Oh, no, no.
time. Give me the name.
Yes,
I'm
ma'am, so
sorry.
you have 2.
Okay.
One of them, the first, look at, so one of them has a 444 for this year, 444 for next year,
Yes.
and 454. So that would be going this year, in the current school year, to -1.5, staying at -1.5 for 2 years, and then going to -1, which is what I have talked to everybody about. But I was also asked, well, what if we kept it at -2 for 1 more year and still got to -1 in the same amount of time? And so the other resolution shows you that. And that would be our 3rd year staying at 435, and then in 2025-26 going to 444, and in 26-27 going to 454. So they all end up at -1 in the 26-27 school year, which I remind you, for a start of the school year, that's less than 2 years away. I mean, we're moving pretty fast. But there's really, there are 2 options. Now, I can make a million options, you know, based on what y'all want to do. But what Dr. Richardson just briefly said, the 2 things I was saying I really would like for us to do is, 1, let's adopt a 3-year plan so superintendents know where we are, but where we're going over 3 years. And the other one is to try to come to some agreement by October so we can give them a target for the rest of the year.
Well, and you said the superintendents, but I don't know about y'all, but I know when I came out of Mega Conference, a lot of the teachers came because this is on their back as well.
Yeah,
And
that's
then,
true.
and I know if it's happening to me, it's happening to y'all, the parents are very involved. So everybody has their eye on the ballgame,
Yes, ma'am.
especially that, you know, retention thing that got their attention.
And then I draw your attention to one other thing that I mentioned in June when we released the data, or in May, maybe June, I don't know. But we are going, Ms. Short's back there, and Dr. Shields. So one of the things we're going to do, we have a model letter, and a letter goes to the students who are below the cut score, whatever it is. We're going to do another letter though, for those students who are between the cut score of the 473, that says you've made the cut score, but you are not a whatever word proficient or whatever reader, and you need to do so. We still encourage you to go to summer reading camp and some other things. So there'll be two different letters, but I think that it was one of the things I heard from some school level educators. Their frustration was just they didn't want to send the message to parents that these students that might have scored 437 were okay, because they're still in danger of falling behind. So we're going to develop a second model letter for those families.
But if a child passes reading with a 60, we used to send them,
Yes, ma'am.
and they were not sufficient nor proficient.
That's true. I know.
So, but I agree with that. I wish there was some way we could require those students, especially the ones that are below the cut score, that they have to go to the summer programs.
We can't, but
I know, but
And
I
I
wish we could.
yeah, yeah.
Because there's so many who don't pay attention to that. Also, I sat with a group of K-3 teachers in Piedmont this past week. And they said, they said the same thing about changing the score, changing the test. And, but I told them I felt there was an appetite to start moving up.
There is.
That I felt like we were going to have to move up
Right.
somewhere or other. And so they were, and I went over that chart there with them that we got at the board retreat. And none of them were upset about the 1.5 minus 1.5. They were content with that, but they did say, I'd like to see how our students scored based on that number this year. So they were going to go back to their drawing board and see. But they understand that it's time to move up, but they also understand that we don't need to expect too much too soon. And Piedmont's one of the top systems in the state as far as their scores are concerned. And so.
Right, and mine, when I spoke to them, they were, same thing that they know we need to up the score. And they're feeling reassured because of doing the science and reading to Fidelity and doing the, what we call the gold standard of professional development. So when the little ones, the itty bitties are well trained and moving up, they will almost come to naught, and those that really, really, truly need that intervention will be the ones that we will be able to capture.
And that was the rest of our conversation, that more students have been retained in first and second grade.
That's right.
And so probably they're getting a better,
Second dose.
they're getting a better education in reading, so.
And Bonnie, don't you think it's true, the more the teachers are doing the science and reading to Fidelity, they're more comfortable and they're working more as a team and they're becoming greater educators?
Absolutely, and the more comfortable they become with their core reading program, all of this programming takes time to become acclimated to, and they're becoming more proficient with it, and so.
And I think they're getting there quickly.
Dr. Mackey, do you think with the letter that you'll design, that'll go out to parents, obviously communication is key, and I'm one of the board members that said I'm very concerned about kids that are, I call it on the cusp. They barely passed, and the parents are going, we made it, and they're moving up. Do you think it would be wise to create, I hate to say it a classification, but to communicate it in a way that you're passing with concern? You're in a group of students that are passing with whatever word, with conditions. So that they know they're in a cohort of students that we are tracking and serving and looking to serve. We're not letting you go in the 4th grade. that sort of thing, do you
Yes,
think?
absolutely, and I see them nodding back there. They're gonna develop this letter, so they're listening, but yeah, I think that's absolutely. We've gotta have some, if not flashing red lights, some flashing yellow lights, so they realize if they don't do additional work, they are likely to fall back
Regress.
below.
And then the teachers, they've been telling the parents this, and this can just show them that you're on their side, you know, it sort of gives them that second dose. The
I'm
teachers
gonna move
are
over
talking
there
to
with you, I feel like we're.
I know, where did
You're the
they go?
teacher, we're all facing you.
No, I did take a shower and wash my hair.
So when you look at this, you know, I agree with you about the communication, but we'll have to be very intentional in communicating if we decide to change the score. Because I can see the headlines in advance. You know, it won't state that we changed the score, it'll just say, well, Alabama either decreased or increased without giving that significant information. You know,
So we'll
and
have to
so
start the
we
talk
need
early.
to start the conversation now. You know, I still reflect back on what was the guy's name, Juan?
Yes.
Juan's, and he kept saying the trend in other states has been to keep the test score for 2 years. You know, and so I believe that we should ultimately strive to get to 454. My question, my wonder to Dr. Mackey is what are the advantages and disadvantages of remaining at 435 versus going to 444 this coming year?
And before he answers that,
Yes,
may I input on
yes,
that?
please.
That has been my concern, knowing that the recommendation was given that we remain at a -2. And also in talking to superintendents and teachers in some of my districts, the concern was, yes, we've shown improvements, but what is the plan? And I think when I see this outline to those that I talked to, you know, the last couple of weeks, this shows a plan.
Exactly.
Even if the plan is, and then one brought to my attention, and I had not thought about this, okay, we've made improvements, we're encouraged, really with some of them in the impoverished areas, that, you know, we can succeed. Perceptions become reality.
Right.
And oftentimes people will perceive, now that we've made improvements, does the board really want to see us improve? Now, I'm saying that's a perception. We know that intentionally, yes, we want them to improve. But beyond that, one brought to my attention, we've had the ESSER funds, where we've been able to do after-school tutoring and additional programming, bringing in the interventionists, wherein now that those monies are gone, we may not have those resources. So I guess what I would say is if we move then to even 1.5, what would we be able to offer those districts that had additional resources to help them get to 435 this year? And then you're asking them to go to 444 without perhaps some of those same resources. So I just wanted to tag on to that before you answer.
Well, those are tough questions. So to go to your question first, I think one thing that happened, and this is good, it's a good thing, but you know, I was not trying to be Chicken Little predicting the sky is falling, but you know, based on our initial numbers, we were expecting it to be like 22%, and it ended up being 9%. So in my mind, and I don't think I was very worried about 22%. In my mind, when I look at what other states that have done the third grade retention ahead of us, so most of them have been somewhere in the, I'm not saying they're targeting a number, but somewhere in the 12 to 15% range. So when our students came in and only 9% were below, it did make me think, maybe we were overly conservative and we should have been a little higher. And that's why I'm okay recommending going to 1.5, because that would have put us this year at a retention rate of 13.65. So that's kind of between the 12 to 15% that we more were expecting. Doesn't mean that that would have been 13% retained. It means they would, you know, but that would have been the initial hurdle. Now, So that's why I think, like y'all, I've spent a lot of evenings thinking about this late at night, but I feel pretty good about that. I do worry about going higher than that in 1 year. But it does raise another question, Dr. Richardson's point. So let's say that's a difference of about 3.4% difference that would be. Sorry, it's 4.4%. Well, our budget calculations, what we just talked about, are, how many kids go to summer reading camp and all that are really based on historic. So it is a chance that we need a little more money. And then deeper,
there are all those you're talking about. They were doing
and those reading interventionists.
Right, reading interventionists.
A lot of our districts they've dropped their reading interventionists that they have been hiring with ESSER funds, and they're just gone. And I talked to one actually this week who said, "Can you fund us?" Well, we don't have money to just, we have the budget. So there is going to be a funnel point where they're going to have fewer resources. Now, some of them are going after local tax increases. We're certainly talking to the legislature. We've talked about the money for the middle grade reading program, but they're definitely going to have less money. I mean, we had over the last 4 years since 2021, we've had $3 billion. I know I sent y'all an email, and I have to remind myself that's a billion is 1,000 millions. 1,000 million. So that's $3,000 million that's gone. It's gone at the end of this month. Now I know some of it will continue to be spent out over the checks will be written over the next several months, but it's gone. And there's no way the state is going to raise the funds to replace that. So I don't want to paint a fairy tale scene like, there's plenty of money to provide all the services, because a lot of the services that districts have been providing are not going to be there. Another reason that I don't want to make too big a jump too fast.
Right. And then too, with that -2, this was the first year that it was tied into retention. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, even though we've been at -2.
What we've been reporting was this is the first year it mattered.
Retention. So this would give us the second year for retention prior to moving. Correct?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. That's
Thank
right.
you.
That's exactly right.
One of the things that we may not be thinking about is this: we have really trained our teachers and taught them how to teach reading that a lot of them didn't have. And so that should have a cumulative effect as we go into the test scores next year. We should be able to see them reach what we said.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, our Tier 1 instruction, in my opinion, is so much better than it was 5 or 6 years ago because of the work ARI is doing.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I know with some districts, Ms. Manning, that were able even to provide after-school, programming and all, they won't be able to do that. But I agree with you, yes, they've got great training and all, but being able to even provide those services for those students and maintaining, that's where I was coming from in reference to that. But you're right, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
I believe the initiative to the legislature was children not be promoted from the 3rd grade that could not read. That's the issue that we're talking about in the score. And I've said that every time we discuss this, my big concern is promoting students who cannot read to the 4th grade. And that's why the legislature intervened beyond us and gave us the law. And if we are not conscientious about promoting, I heard the specialists say that if you retain students, they'll drop out of school. Well, the other reality, if students can't read, they will certainly drop out of school. We didn't have that data. And I don't even know historically what happened before we engaged in that, the percentage of 3rd graders historically that have been retained. I mean, 10% to me is not significant. And I believe that we have more than that in the third grade who cannot read. I don't have data on that, but I do believe, in my experience, that that's true. And my fear was that we're not consistent with what the legislature wants. And I don't think 1.5 is a radical jump. And I looked at the data, and I looked at 1.25, there's no real difference in the numbers that we had that didn't achieve the scores in the 1.25 and 1.5. But it's, as you know, a psychological effect of going to 3/4 of a point versus half a point. And my preference is doing it for 1 year, but as an administrator, I know you need a 2-year plan.
Right,
And I expect,
I'm sorry.
and that's why I support the 2-year 1.5, but in 2 years, and with what we are pushing down, what we're seeing, the retention rate in first and second grade higher. Instead of, and the concept that the public has that we're socially promoting is wrong. And I think all the initiatives that the governor has and that we have and the funding, we have the responsibility to try to assure people don't walk into the 4th grade and cannot read. And that's a sad situation. As a superintendent, I know that happens.
Exactly. And I agree with what you're saying. I think prior to you coming in, though, what I said based upon what the statistician has said early on, and I think Dr. Chestnut mentioned this, the trend was normally wherever you were, as far as the cut score was, to remain there at least for 2 years and then move on. So that's how that discussion had come up. But I hear what you're saying. We've got to show that we've improved, but I know that the -2, that's what I was asking Dr. Mackey, was based upon retention this time. And the statistician had, mentioned that the trend normally was to stay at that level for 2 years.
But as Dr. Mackey said, the statistician was wrong in what percentage of our students would be retained at 2.0. And that's.
No, and I said the trend. No, because I said, and I'm not, I don't have any scores, but he said that if we began with the -2.
Right.
That normally the trend was nationally with other states, wherever they began to remain there for 2 years. And what I said prior to you coming in was that in talking to superintendents and teachers, they were saying we did not have a plan. However, this shows a plan, whether we go forward with 1.5 or remain at -2. We now have a plan. It hasn't been clear before, so that's what I'm saying prior to you coming in.
And I was wrong. I thought that was purely in my mind, looking at the first 2 years' data. I was trying to triangulate out where we would be, and I thought this year we would see something closer to 15 to 17%, but it was 9%. It was much better than I had hoped, which is good. But the trend in most states is to is that 12 to 15% of the states that do a 3rd grade retention. But it wasn't the statistician that told me that. That was all me, and that's not
That's a quick quote.
I'm not a statistician. I am definitely not a statistician.
The expert that gave us data to make decisions on was you, right? I thought it was the other guy.
Well, you can call me an expert, but our TAC committee,
right,
that Dr. DeBrott he leads, yes, they made the recommendation.
Right.
But they did not predict how many students they thought that was going to retain. That was based purely on the, other factors.
Well, I think we all know that you either pay for it now or pay for it later. And the biggest, when we talk about money, it's one thing, but when you talk about children and the dropping out, and it always happens in what we used to call junior high school or middle school now, and that's the most vulnerable age group. And if we can save that group, so to speak, but having watched the former reading initiative that was so successful, and then we didn't get the funding, and the legislature didn't support it in the beginning. We had to raise private funds, and then they finally did, and then they just let it go because they had another little project. Well, at this point, it appears that we have their support, and if I had to put everything into one area, besides the math, of course, math's obviously important, but right now, I think we need to stay the course, and if we hold children back, it's to their benefit in the long run. And it sounds cruel, but I would rather have a child being held back in the first grade than I would them dropping out in middle school, whether it's the fifth, sixth, because it'll catch up with us, with them in particular, and that's really, to me, the biggest sacrifice. If we don't demand, they usually,
Right. More of
yeah,
them
they
are
rise to the
being,
occasion and the demands, the
Right.
standards. And I think we need to put the focus, and
that's right.
if some of them don't make it, then it helps them. The whole idea is not to punish, but to help to benefit them in the future. And the earlier we do it, I think the less damage it does, in so many different ways.
And I think everybody's goal, and I would say, every legislator I've talked to, that's a lot of them, their goal is not to retain any students. It's just to, I keep saying it's about prevention and intervention more than retention. So we gotta, and that's where we all want to get. We just gotta figure out what's that score though. And
But that's our intention.
and we want it to be, so this year, if we'd have been at -1.5, then that would have been 13.65% of the students that would have gotten the letter. Hopefully, we still, more of them would have gone to summer school. So remember, we sent out letters to 9% of the students, 8.98%. Okay, of the ones then, and I gave you this last month, I have to look back and see, but of the ones that went to summer reading and took the test, about another 2.5% made it, and so we dropped that down to like 6.5% that then were evaluated up based on an IEP or something like that. So what I would hope is even if we went to 13.65% at the end of summer, it would still be about 6.5% because you would have a higher, because those students they did score higher, so they would have a higher pass rate on the summer test because you'd have more students taking it, but with the assumption that they are a little better readers than the students who scored below 435, and so they would have a better chance of doing well on that test. So our overall retention might not actually go up even if we go to 1.5. It's just that more of them will end up in summer reading camp taking the second assessment or being evaluated by a portfolio or IEP team or otherwise. That's a maybe. I can't swear that would happen, but you would assume, let's say that if we said we were going to give the summer reading test to the kids that didn't even score on this chart, the ones that scored 500 and above. Well, your assumption should be that all of those students would pass the summer reading test, so your actual failure rate wouldn't change because all the new students you're putting into the testing pool would automatically be above that level. So I don't know if I'm making sense or not, but I'm just saying if we go to 1.5, the assumption is that they should have a higher pass rate on the summer test than the students who are lower.
And I think we just also need to remember that we really have a good, not this plan, but a good plan in place. And the teachers have bought in, they know what to do. And the new interventions that we use that are dyslexic sort of sponsored are working for our non-readers or are struggling. I just think we're going to be shocked at, no matter, with this cut score, our kids are going, oh.
That's mine. I think they thought that was yours. That's mine.
Oh.
That's
Well, it
okay.
sort of blends.
Hold on to it. Bring it here because I'm going to
Yeah,
explain.
that's a
I'll
good
explain
list.
what that is.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice dress.
But I still think that all of these
Nice scar.
things that ARI and the teachers and all the professional development were cooking with gas. And I really think the kids are going to surprise us at how well they're going to do. If I was a betting woman, I'd be betting you on that one, but I'm not. But
Since you're on down there trying to get us
Yeah, we do have follow-up, don't we, for those that do succeed, apparently, then
Yeah.
they, so the next year we're watching them.
That's
And
right.
that's what I've told people, so I'm glad
That's
to hear
right.
it.
And that's
That's
why we're putting money into it, actually giving them some.
But that follow-up to me is crucial.
Yeah.
If they succeed, that's wonderful, but to make sure
All those,
We just
that
don't.
they
right,
can run.
all those students that are promoted for good cause exemptions do have a reading plan, a SHRIP, that goes with them, a reading improvement plan.
And that includes those who go to the summer programs.
Yes.
I don't recall, did we get the number of students that were promoted using portfolio?
We did, I don't remember, do y'all have that off the top of your head, the number of
They still
students?
have until September 16th.
That's right. We had a number of how many we had last month. I could look it up, but they have until September 16th to get it in, so it's not final.
Okay, so
But
you'll
it's,
send us those
Will
numbers.
you bring us those?
Yeah,
Will-
broken
will-
down.
Yes.
Can we
Yep.
see those?
Oh, absolutely.
And then,
What were the-
follow up to that question, are all portfolios have the same requirements? So,
Yes and no. So they all have, information that was required by the literacy task force with specificity as to what goes in each of those categories. And they don't all use the same textbooks. And so that may look different as they're measuring that standard, but they are all measuring the same standards and should be using the recommendations of the literacy task force as to
Where's
what
your other
to
one?
use for those specific areas.
so what accountability measure do we use to make sure that all the portfolios are strong?
So the regional specialists are in the schools that can work with the schools in that support. But right now, they're uploading that information so that we would more likely have access to that. We
Okay,
don't have access at this point unless we are physically in the schools.
okay,
Our Unified Insight is providing us where we will be able to do that.
okay.
As we look at these numbers to see are they high in a certain place or not, I had a conversation with the district. And as we were looking at their specific information, their schools has a higher number of portfolios. So that's a red flag. We need to be looking into that to see what is happening in the school and how can we move those students to where they don't need the portfolio.
And please understand, I'm a trust and verify type of person. So I wanna know that, I know that all portfolios can't be equal, but I wanna make sure that we are very carefully culling through them. And we just, haven't produced a weak portfolio and promoted someone.
I would agree.
I'm sorry, let me just, so to that question, so as of the self-reported data that I gave you last month, just to remind, we had 59 students who were being promoted on an IEP or taking the alternate ACAP, which means they're severely disabled. 149 being promoted based on their English language proficiency skill, which is in the law. If they don't speak English, if they don't speak English proficiently, then they can be promoted anyway. Obviously, those students still need a lot of support in reading now.
They do.
431 who were being promoted on either an IEP or 504 plan. And then 41 were being promoted because they had been previously retained, had received intensive intervention, and thus you can't just keep retaining kids. And then 124 on portfolios and 116 supplemental. That's the supplemental assessment. So, but they have until September 16 to keep reporting these data. So those will go up. But it does give you kind of there were as many people under IEP teams promoted as all others put together. I would imagine that's going to stay pretty, as more data come in, pretty consistent. And then after September 16th, we'll give you an updated report on that. Either I can send it to you or do a report next work session, either way.
So Dr. Mackey,
Yes, sir.
what are you recommending as a cut score for next year?
Well, my recommendation coming in is that we go to 1.5, so 444 for this year, stay at 444 for the next year, and then go to 454 in the spring of 27. but I can live with either one. I do think, I mean, I already said that, I just think that the students, you know, I don't want to say, I don't want this to sound like we're punishing kids for doing well, but they did remarkably better than I had expected. And that's why if students had stayed where I thought they were going to be, and we had had about 15 to 17% scoring, I would be sitting here pounding the table, begging you to keep it at -2 for at least one more year. But they didn't, and so that's why I feel okay about going to 1.5. It will not give us a trend line, and what Dr. Chestnut said scares me more than anything. I can read the headlines in the spring saying, third grade reading scores go down. And that wouldn't be true. But
when you talk about reliability and validity, it will be different because it won't be based on your -2. So
That's
it
right.
will be, when you talk about statistics and reliability and
That's right.
validity, it will be a different parameter altogether.
Yeah.
And that won't be present. But anyway,
What do you
we'll
think
deal
is-
with it.
But that is my biggest concern.
What do you think
And I
is
know you're
best?
thinking, I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth because I'm thinking both sides of my brain. Yes, ma'am.
What do you think is best for students? And that's where we have to just focus on what's
Well-
best for students and forget the headlines.
Okay.
We've all had to deal with headlines, you know, good or bad, whatever. But the main thing is, the course we need to take is what is in the best interest of the students.
So, this is a good question.
Very good question.
But, in my opinion, of all the things we talk about in reading, this cut score is the least important.
Bingo.
Because it's not a big deal. To me, it's about sending the message that reading is important. It's about all the prevention stuff. It's about getting the right core curriculum in the teacher's hands, training them how to use it, training them in letters. So I think that getting people to buy into the importance of high-quality reading instruction and high-quality materials to teach reading is the most important thing. And I actually think, based on conversations with some legislators, I think that was their main goal. It was not the retention piece so much as to, you know, flash the red lights that we have got to, you know, everybody, including parents, have to take this seriously. And so I think we've actually already, we're getting there. We're getting that. People are taking it more seriously than they have since the reading initiative. I think people
The
did
first
take
one.
it seriously during
Yeah,
the
they
first
did.
reading initiative.
And then it,
And the educators kept taking it seriously,
They
but then
did.
the legislature quit funding
they
it.
just didn't have the resources.
So that's right, exactly. So now I think we're back. In my opinion, I think we're even ahead of where we were in 2008, which was kind of the highlight, kind of the high water mark. But so I don't want to sound catty, but to me the cut score is of all the things we discussed, it's the one least important to me. I'm more concerned about getting funding for really good middle school interventions. I'm concerned about making sure the teachers are writing really good reading improvement plans, the third grade teachers for those fourth grade teachers, training our fourth grade teachers in how to continue to build reading skills. And so that sounds like a cop-out, but I really can live with either one because to me it's just not the most important.
And I understand
piece.
your answer, but I think everything you said, I agree with.
Yeah, sure.
But the one part of that is making sure that we reach the children who need help. And that's the tool that we have in place. And that's really, other than a teacher saying, you know, you really can't read, a more subjective, that's an objective way to deal with that. And if we can catch a child who otherwise maybe passed on, and slip through the cracks, I always hate to use that expression, but if we can take care of the problem then that's the best alternative for the child to me.
Right.
And I think we're
And what you just mentioned a minute ago, the more we are seeing, I had that pulled up and closed my iPad, much higher retention rates in first grade, and that is the earlier the better, and so again, the districts have taken that to heart, and they're really I think, I'm not saying they take it seriously before, but I think they're taking it much more seriously to look at those formative assessment data, even in kindergarten and first grade, and trying to identify which students are in danger of third grade retention and need to be more, to either more intervention, more summer and after school work, or to be retained. And I think Ms. Ziegler's exactly right. I think we're actually going to amaze ourselves in the work going forward. But I mean, that's my recommendation, is to move it up.
Yeah.
But I can live either way, I promise you. I do think that we want to get to -1 over time. I do, and I think that either one of these I can live with. I won't have a sleepless night. But if we're in February still talking about this and haven't given our principals and teachers some direction, I will start having sleepless nights, because they need to know
It's only fair.
what we're doing.
But when you look at it as a whole, and like everybody said, I agree with everything that's been said. I'm also considering the fact that we're pushing for the 52 million for the strugglers in grades 4 through 8. So those kids that may fall between the 435 and the 444 will still have an opportunity to get the support that they need, because we're looking more, as Stephanie said, at what's best for children. So we have to look at it collectively, that when we move this score based on the 1.5, we're also considering that we've got to be really intentional in pushing for the support for those students grades 4 through 8.
And our budget, we're not like pulling the rug out from underneath them. We know that they're not gonna have the ESSER money, we know that.
Right.
But we are understanding that the funding has been decreased, so we're not
Right.
throwing them under the bus.
Right.
And if anybody is creative, it's our teachers, and, I just think they'll figure, schools will know what's best for our kids, and we've just gotta sort of trust them that I just think we're gonna be shocked, I really do. From what I'm seeing, in a wonderful way. But what I'm seeing when I go through the schools is a lot of hot teaching. I'm seeing wonderful, and the kids are out in the hall reading, and I see volunteers in there and whatever. It's just, it's a whole community buy-in.
But one thing that I'm seeing from the whole discussion, the fact that we're saying 1.5, what will make it palatable at this point is that they have 2 years. So we're not gonna do 1.5 this upcoming year and then go to 1 the next year. I think that will be encouraging to them, to say, without the resources, we're having training, we're getting some, additional things done, and we can get there. Instead of doing like we did this year, going from -2 to 1.5, we're gonna let them stay at 1.5 for 2 years.
Because this other one has us from 435 to 444 for 1 year.
Exactly,
That's no good.
exactly. And plus, I think from the superintendents and teachers, we'll hear people say there is a plan.
There is.
And I
I think,
think
you
it's-
just keep saying
and
that,
I
but I
think
think
that's
that's
important.
critical now.
Right.
I agree.
And I like that it gives us a little bit of a stretch, but it's not unreasonable.
Well, that's gonna be the recommendation,
Okay.
unless I get all of y'all blow me up between now and then. We have another month, but right now, that'll be my recommendation. Is the first one I gave you. So that'd be 444, 444, 454. And y'all know how open I am to talking. So call me today, call me tomorrow. Call me tomorrow. Call me tonight if you want to. But we've got a few things this afternoon. Okay, you want me to jump to the other one? We can always come back. So this one I may take some discussion. It may not take as long. I'm going to ask Connor to pass you out a copy because I know not everybody's assembly was working. So remember, the legislature passed a bill that said for us to create another pathway to the high school diploma. We are calling this Option A and Option B. And essentially, I'm going to let you get one, and I'm going to show you. So Option A is what we do now, okay? But you see red in Option A, and that's because I'm correcting something that was in the law that's no longer the law, that's not been in practice in a long time. But we still had in there physical education, y'all changed that to beginning kinesiology several years ago, but our code, it still said PE, so that first one, option A, this is what we currently require. 4 English language arts, 4 math, we dictate what 3 of them would be. 4 social studies, we dictate all of those. 4 science, we dictate 2 of those. Biology and lab science. And then the next page, 1 credit of beginning kinesiology, that's the old physical education, usually taught in 9th grade. Half credit of health, a credit of career preparedness, 3 credits of either, this will be important in a second, career tech and or foreign language, which we're changing to world languages. That's the current in vogue term that everybody uses. And or arts education and or electives, okay? And then, or excuse me, those are not, those 3, and then electives 2.5 credits. It ends up, so that's 24 credits total. Option B would be still 4 English language arts, and we dictate the 4. 2 math, which is what the law says, but now the law just says 2 math. I would propose we go beyond just saying 2 math, and that we put in the rules that includes, at a minimum, Algebra 1 and geometry. Okay, science 2 credits. Again, the law just says 2 credits in science, but I would say we dictate one of those must be biology and one must be a physical science with a lab. Okay, 4 credits in social studies, no change there, which by the way, it's been the law forever and ever. World history, 2 years of United States history, and then a half a credit of government, United States government, half a credit of economics. Then, so keep going down. So then, the beginning kinesiology, 1 credit. Career preparedness, half credit's the same. This is where it really gets different. So they would have to have, go on option B, they would have to take 3 career tech courses in a sequence that made them a completer. Not just, I'm going to take ag today and I'm going to take welding next year, but 3 in a sequence that would lead to them being a career tech completer. So you see 3 there. And then electives, they would move to 6.5 credits. Those electives could be, though, see it's a little different, additional mathematics and or science courses first. Okay, because like if I want option B and I'm going to be a nurse, then I'm probably going to need part of those 6.5 electives. I'm going to go back and take chemistry in addition to the 2 sciences that I'm required, and I might need an additional mathematics. Okay, so that's just one example. So additional mathematics and or science can be electives, and or world languages, and or arts education, and or other electives. So they will, basically what we're giving them is 3 credits in there, not 4. You're thinking, why not 4? Because they're taking 2 less math and 2 less science. Because we're requiring 3 career tech. So there's really only 3 credits. They get 3 additional electives, which can be additional. They can again be other math and science, or they can be another CTE course. Some of these students are going to take 4 years of CTE and get a capstone course that 4th year, or they can be, they can take extra PE classes. Other people are doing that now. You know, they want to take a weightlifting class because they're also in sports. So it creates the opportunity for them to be career tech completers and get those other electives in that they might want. They both add up to 24. That was a question. A lot of people said, with this new law, are you going to reduce the credit to just 23? Because if you just look at the law and pure look at it, it looks like we could go back to 23. Both diplomas will be 24 credits. Both diplomas will lead to people being able to go to a 2-year or 4-year college. Both diplomas will be available to all students in all schools. And if you will go over to the last page, I'll explain to you why the word charter school is in there in a second. But the number 2 on the last page, the diploma issue shall not indicate option A or option B. I don't want people out there having an option A diploma and an option B diploma. They will have an Alabama high school diploma with 24 credits. They will have followed 2 different paths to get there, just like you know, those of us who went to college, I have a Bachelor of Science degree, other people have a Bachelor of Science degree, and your major's in there, but it doesn't say one person has a Bachelor of Science degree and they took U.S. history, and another person has a Bachelor of Science degree and they took Western Civ. You don't print that on your degree. We don't want to print that on our diplomas. Okay, the word charter school board is added because, again, this was something that we found in reading it. Evidently, charter schools have not been authorized to issue high school diplomas since charter schools started. So, because it said high school diplomas issued only upon the authority of a county or city board of education. And so while we're cleaning it up, obviously our charter school students want diplomas that are legitimate in the state, so we need to fix that. If you go back, the page before, again, we're cleaning up everywhere it said physical education and making that beginning kinesiology so that it matches throughout. We're taking out, look at, there's on that second page from the back, the third page in. So you see the distance learning requirement. So back in the day, and I remember when this happened, I was a local superintendent, the state board passed a distance learning requirement. Now that was prior to computer science as we know it. And it was not a course, but the requirement was that everybody had to have an experience in distance learning, which was defined as the ability to attach a document to an email and successfully send an email. I don't think we necessarily need to teach that anymore. Because that was when email was so new that most people didn't know what email was. So I'd say let's take that out of our requirements. And look at how soon, when that was though, y'all. That was in the early 2000s they passed it and made it effective in 2019. So that's just, you know, that's been 20 years ago, but things change quickly. We did add in its place though, that option B requires, again, it says in the diploma listing 3 credits in career tech, but this is where it says they have to be 3 credits.
In sequence.
Yeah, in a sequence, so it's what it means. And yes, sir.
In your concept of career tech and career objectives, if my child is going to be, his intention, his career is military, and he takes 4 years of ROTC, are we entertaining those, in fact, as career technical education? Because some of us do.
Yeah, ROTC courses are all career tech in Alabama. That's the way we define them.
Could we mention detail planning except for JROTC, but JROTC is considered a CTE.
Yes, sir. It does work. So that could be what they could do. They could do 4 JROTC classes, and those students are going to want to go back and take another math or science too.
That's a way that our people can promote JROTC, is that compliance.
Yes, sir.
So some of that recruitment, that will enhance that recruitment ability in many of my school systems and the desirability to fund JROTC.
And nobody is required, no school, nor any student, nor any parent, to be on an option A or an option B. So there will be no, like, if your ACT score is 22, you're on option A, and if it's 21, you're on option B. And anybody tries to do that, the furor of the state superintendent will come down on them, because that is not the purpose. We're going to have kids that score a 32 on the ACT that want to be option B because they like working with their hands and they want to go into robotics or such thing. And we're going to have kids with a 20 ACT that are they want to do the option A. That it cannot, we cannot see it that way, because the old days, Dr. Reynolds and I have talked about this a lot, because I know you worked in the old vocational ed, and you know, you send people to the vocational school because you want to get them out of your building. I'm telling you, if anybody tries to go back to that, there will be fire raining down on them, because that is not what this is about. This is about giving students opportunities. Because I want to call you out this afternoon and keep keep you on your
Because I
toes.
was late coming in. No, but the issue of JRTC and enhancing its desirability and funding is an important component.
And those are,
And we don't send them over there to get rid of either.
Right.
that's right. Let me say one other thing, and I know Ms. Ziegler has a question, I'll answer any questions, but the top of the third page, you see the workforce pathway seal. This was in the law also. So this is kind of a step above. For a student to get a seal, they have to not only have 3 courses, but the 4th. They'll have to have 4 courses in a sequence. So our got my experts back there, but our thinking is that these will be students that they become completers, and then in that senior year, they do a capstone project, an internship, an apprenticeship, something that goes beyond, and then that will give them the seal.
I was going to ask you about that. I have the page open, so you answered it. I like that. And it's just as a word of caution, you can drop the word old and just say former.
Former, I'm sorry. Former.
Yeah.
I think his intention was clear.
It was.
I got it.
You know what?
She's trying to.
I just had a birthday last Friday, so I understand the concept.
All right, keep
Yes,
these
ma'am.
from fighting, no, just kidding.
Oh, I'm
So-
not funny. No, these two. Those.
So, in middle school, the counselors, will they be really sort of setting the stage
Oh,
with
yes.
our, they can't wait till they're already in high school in that 9th grade, they need to almost start in 6th, 7th, and just sort of
Yes.
be setting the stage
So-
for them, correct?
So 2 things.
Okay,
So you see first, it says effective 25-26. These are students who they're juniors this year, but let's say they're finishing up, so they're on the old path, the former path, the current path. This is the current path, which would be option A. But as they go into their senior year, they're like, oh my gosh, this all of a sudden opens up an opportunity. I'm not going to take my 4th year of math or my 4th year of science. I really want an internship instead. So there would be an option for some students, it'd probably be a small number, to switch from option A to option B next school year and graduate in 26 with an option B. And some of them will go ahead and earn the seal because they've already, their path includes the 4 and the capstone. This is not stuff we've not already done. So some of them will go ahead and earn the seal. And that's why I don't want us to say, oh, we're not even going to make this an option till the 2030s. But the majority of students are those students, yes, that are now 6th and 7th graders that'll be working on their high school plan.
right.
And it's going to take, again, I'm looking at this corner over here because I have very highly qualified people in career tech and in instructional services, and they already know, like they're breathing hard, I think, thinking about this is going to be working with those career coaches, it's going to be working with our middle school and high school counselors, with our principals, to help them not just understand it, I think they'll understand it pretty fast, but how do you communicate this to parents? How do parents make those informed decisions in 8th grade when they're building that 4-year plan? Now remember, they can also go back and forth. We're not, so the good thing, one of the good things about the way we're lining up the math and science credits is somebody can be on option B, and they can do it for their freshman year and their sophomore year, and they can still make a change and say, you know what, I want to do this. So they've got 2 years and then they can make a change. And most of them could even make a change in that 3rd year. Now, once you become a senior, you might not have as many opportunities to change. But you asked about counseling, so we're going to do a lot of training with counselors. We hopefully, so one of the reasons I want to bring it now is if we can announce the intent to adopt this in October, then you can make it final at the December meeting, see? And then January 1, we can get lots of information out because they're going to start building those 8th graders are going to start building their schedules and their 4-year plans. A lot of them start in February. So I feel like we need to get this to them by the 1st of the year. Of course, they'll see it today, what we're talking about. Yes, ma'am.
The, first page, item 8, says that effective for students in the 9th grade. And I understand that, but it doesn't
Oh, you're right.
say anything about someone
Yeah,
enter,
that's a mistake.
okay.
It should have just said effective for the 25-26 school year. That's a mistake. I take full ownership of that. So that, let's mark through that. Thank you. So it should just say effective for students, marked out in the 9th grade and and it should be effective for students beginning in the 25-26 school year. Thank you.
Good job.
Should have been a reporter, shouldn't it?
Yeah, you could be the editor, you just skip the reporter, you could edit it.
Well, I've just been sitting in a seat, and I know that if somebody picks that up after what Dr. Mackey said about this coming year, that a senior could do that, I'm thinking they will understand it.
Absolutely, and,
I'm glad you called it.
and once it's there, it's there.
It's there, yeah.
So, good point. Excellent. And the other thing is, when they were talking about this concept, and we've had something, as you know, our former plan had a lot of this in there.
Yes, ma'am. That's right.
But as they move through the process, we start mentioning they want to be in there. They still have that flexibility, even if they take
Absolutely.
option B
Yes, ma'am.
to change.
Absolutely.
Because we all know how many people change their majors in their freshman year. College, if they take that route, and then they decide, I really don't want to be whatever it was they wanted to be for a lifetime. They're really short lifetime at that point. But, yeah,
That's good. Absolutely.
okay, so that's
You'll be able
the
to
other
change
thing.
back and
Reading
forth.
it, that's the way I felt about it, but
You're right.
just
Communication again.
It makes me feel good, because that's the way you should have read it. We're gonna make sure, we gotta make sure every parent reads it that way
That's
too.
yeah, and I'm glad you caught that because that's major application.
Yeah, it is.
Maybe
Okay.
one
Yeah.
quick question, on
Uh-huh.
the last page, about the Alabama Physical Fitness Assessment that's administered to grade 2 through 12, how is that done? I'm just trying to get clarity, better
Our PE
understand.
teachers do that
Every year?
every year,
Okay,
and we report it, and they can earn the presidential fitness. They have to do
Gotcha.
so many, usually so
Okay.
many pull-ups and push-ups.
okay.
But we do
I
administer it
remember
every
it back
year.
in the,
Yeah.
I just didn't.
And that was
And we
still
report
good.
it out.
Yeah, yeah, we're still
Okay,
doing it.
thank you.
And that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, on the table to be announced as intent in October, and again, I think that's really important so we can clarify something by the end of the year. The next item is, I always smile when I do this, so the law says that y'all have to appoint the members of the School of Fine Arts Board of Trustees. And that the school is supposed to nominate 3 people in order of preference, and you're to pick 2 of the 3. So you see that there are 2 openings, and so number 1 is number 2 on the second one, and number 2 is number 1. So it's pretty obvious which 2 people they want. I would suspect that the third person, somebody they said, if you'll let us put your name down, we promise you won't be nominated. I don't know why it's written that way, but that's what the way the law is written. But what we would recommend, what's that?
It's in your
Oh, it's in my assembly.
It's your student assembly, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so they're number 1, so they're, for position 1, their recommendation is Javacia Harris Bowser, and their second choice is Webb Robertson. And then for position 2, Webb Robertson's the first choice, and Javacia Harris Bowser's the second choice. And then I'm not gonna read out the third choice name. So how we normally do that is we'll ask for a recommendation, we'll ask for a motion. I'll look back in the way we did it before, but basically we ask for a motion to name to the open position the person that was number 1 on ASFA's list. And
So
so,
you voted
and we'll
for
have, and we'll have a
Well,
one
it's
and a
different
two.
event
So
we
there are
voted for.
two.
It's a different kind of position where we actually voted for which one we wanted.
Yeah, that was the old charter school we did, but for this one, we basically, the motion is just to, or the recommendation is to approve what they recommended. And then we'll get a motion in a second and move forward. I don't know any of these people. We do have, they have to give us a resume, and you have the resume in your, should have it in your assembly. If you don't, I mean, it is in there, but if you can't see it, I'll give you my hard
The odd
copy.
thing is, I thought we never got pictures in resumes anymore.
Well,
We do.
do on this one, yes,
I said, that was,
usually don't.
One time you don't.
that's what I was told to not do.
I guess they decided they wanted it.
I understand.
And that, I think, Dr. Chestnut, that's it for me.
Besides for resolutions.
Any other questions,
Resolutions.
comments? If not, we are adjourned.
Remember, wear red.
We're red.
We're
We're
ready.
gonna have superintendent's updates.
And we
and we're
will,
saving-
have
I don't
lunch
have anything
at
else.
Ford Middle School at 11:30 next time.
Yeah, we'll get everybody over there. We'll transport everybody.
Wear red.
Wear red, and I'll remind you to wear red before the end.
I wear a red dress.
If you wear a red dress, Dr. Reynolds, I'll take a picture.
That'll be fine.
That would be a